Greetings everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I am talking to you from the banks of the Fox River in Geneva, Illinois, about 45 minutes west of Chicago. And just a short distance away from where I'm standing is the Fabyan Villa Museum and Japanese Gardens. So I'll tell you a little bit about that place here in a moment, but first, as a reminder, if you're into seeing museums, roadside attractions, historical places, and nature preserves, give the channel a like and subscribe. That's the type of content I like to profile here. So without further ado, let's begin this journey. Now the land itself sits on or right along the Fox River Trail. These bikers here. And this trail stretches between Oswego, Illinois and Algonquin, Illinois. About 45 miles of walking and biking trails. So the land is owned by the King County Forest Preserve. They also maintain it as well. It's open to the public, and it's quite a popular place, as you can see here with this packed parking lot. Now, Colonel George Fabyan wasn't actually a colonel. That was an honorary name given to him. He was born in 1867 in Boston, Massachusetts, into a wealthy family that made their fortune in the textile industry. So having bowed out of the textile business and settling here in Geneva with his wife Nelle, Colonel Fabyan was left with nothing to do. So what does any bored millionaire do when he's got nothing on his plate? Why, start a cryptography business. What else? And that's exactly what happened here on these grounds. Colonel Fabyan opened the very first privately owned research lab in the United States, Riverbank Laboratories, which sits right here, right off of Route 31, across the street from where his old homestead was. Now, Fabyan was a believer in the Baconian theory, which states that Sir Francis Bacon was the true author of William Shakespeare's works, and he established this cryptography company to prove that was the case. Now, the people that did eventually come to work here at this facility for Colonel Fabyan eventually disproved Baconian theory. The U.S. military trained here in World War I in learning all the ways of cryptography and deciphering code from the enemy. And it was a very useful tool in helping win the war. In fact, future U.S. Army cryptographer William Friedman and his wife Elizabeth worked for Fabyan at this facility, and their work here eventually laid the path towards the establishment of the National Security Agency, or the NSA. It looks like Colonel Fabyan's business is still going strong. It's now called the Riverbank Acoustical Laboratories. Land surrounding the building is now houses. But the street name is here, Riverbank Drive. And the neighborhood itself is called Riverbank Crossing. Back over on Forest Preserve property now, and I should mention that the place I just visited, Riverbank Laboratories, is not part of the actual Forest Preserve like the house and the Japanese gardens are. It is a bit of somewhat of a hike to get over there when there's no sidewalk and I'm not wearing the right shoes, but wanted to at least give a background and history of Colonel Fabyan and his cryptography work, because I thought that was pretty neat information to share. So we'll continue on with the tour here. Had to stop off here at this picnic shelter. Apparently, this was once used to house the Fabyan's pet bear, which I found very interesting. The inside the Colonel's Japanese garden. And I read somewhere that he spent some time in Japan, which is where he got the inspiration for this garden. I may be wrong, but I say I did read that somewhere. Here's the tea house. And over there, I don't know if you can see it, we'll get a little closer. This is where the ceremonial washing takes place before you go inside to the house. See if I can get a shot inside here. That section over there across the pond is the wedding area, which I guess this place is very popular for weddings. I can understand why. Now that right there is called the Moon Bridge. And if you can see in the pond there, the reflection creates a full circle. As I said earlier, I didn't bring the right shoes, but we'll give this a try here. Okay. We're on top of the Moon Bridge. Get a really good view of the entire garden here. And down we go with these unsturdy sandals. Okay. Just wanted to show one more view on the top of this bridge here. And the waterfall that leads into the pond. Just heard from the master gardener that this garden has poison ivy in it. So if you do come and visit, just be on the lookout. So I was mistaken. It was their home until 1939 when Nelle passed away. George died in 1936. Now, I'm no expert on architecture, but I do know the name Frank Lloyd Wright. I just think it's pretty neat to have a Frank Lloyd Wright designed house right here, very close to where I live. And in my research, apparently there's another one down the street that he designed. But this was originally a farmhouse, as the placard stated, and the Fabians hired the famed architect to turn this into their home. View from the front of the house.
Originally an old farmhouse that was built here in the late 1800s. It was purchased by the Fabians, that's Colonel George Fabyan and his wife Nelle, in 1905. At the time they bought the house, they were living in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. The cool thing to do if you were living in Chicago and had a lot of money was to buy a weekend place or a country estate. So that's what this was for them, at least at first. Then in 1907, they had the house renovated by Frank Lloyd Wright. So what you're looking at is that 1907 Frank Lloyd Wright remodel. After the remodel, they decided they liked it pretty well and they did move here full time, living here until the end of their lives. The Colonel in 1936, his wife Nelle in 1939. Okay, you can come on in, you can grab a seat and go on your left. Now worked as a traveling salesman for a number of years. We think it was on one of those trips that he met Nelle, who was living in northern Wisconsin at the time. They met, they were married within a year of meeting each other. They moved to Omaha, Nebraska for a year. And then they came to Chicago because the Colonel had reconciled with his father and taken over as the Chicago branch manager of his father's business. That meant when his father passed away in 1905, he inherited a huge sum of money to the tune of about $1 to $3 million. It sounds like a lot now. It was worth more back in 1905. It was that inheritance that mostly made the estate possible.
This is the kitchen, and this is actually the original floor from the farmhouse, up to where the tile is. The sink is also original to the house, and you might notice that it seems kind of low. but their cook was a very petite woman, and I think both Frank Lloyd Wright and the Fabians, they wanted to cater to the people that lived there, and so they made this single. And you might notice that the mantle is relatively low. Nelle, as well as the cook, they're a petite woman, and so they designed the furniture to be accompany her. So that the mantle was low, chairs are low, and the bathroom, you should all take a peek in there. There's some very interesting and advanced features of it. There's water both from above and then from the side. And the sink had foot pedals to turn the faucets on instead of handles. We believe that she was, I don't want to say clean freak, but it turned out that maybe, but she was worried about disease and all that, and so we wanted to use her for that.
There's the foot pedals instead of the knobs on the seat.
Since this was no bedroom, what do you think is missing? So if you see.
Alright, so this is a guest bedroom. If you came to stay with the Fabians, they might have put you up here. The furniture in this room has a bit of a story because it actually got sold off during the 1939 estate sale. It ended up with a family in South Carolina who figured out it had come from us because inside one of the sideboards was written Fabyan, Geneva. They arranged to donate it back to us. We had a huge fundraiser to get it shipped out here. We got it up the stairs, which is the most impressive part. It came home after being missing for over half a century, so we're really lucky to have it. So this is the sleeping porch. In the summer months, you'd leave these windows wide open, you get a breeze up from the river, it'd be the coolest place in the house to sleep. That being said, they didn't have any use for this room during the winter months. So in the winter, they'd bring their pet monkeys inside, and the monkeys would sleep in here. So the metal floor, the drainage pipes in the corner would have helped to clean up after the monkeys when they came to visit. The floor in here is a tin floor. We think it was the old tin roof for the old farmhouse that they then just repurposed for the floor of this room. So this is the Colonel's bedroom, the master bedroom. We took that step down to get in here. The floor of this room is about a foot lower than the rest of the second floor. You may also notice the mantle is very high. I can barely see myself in that mirror. That is because the Colonel was about 6'4", so he was very tall. He was 6'4", she was 4'10". They were almost a 1.5 foot difference in height, so radical space between them. We mentioned that we were going to talk about Riverbank later in the tour, and here's where we do it. So we built these laboratory buildings across the street, and then he hired researchers to come work on various projects over there. It was described by some of them as a scientist's playground, because sort of whatever you could convince the Colonel was a good thing to work on, he would let you work on. But the biggest project they ever did got started because the Colonel really liked this idea that Sir Francis Bacon had written the Shakespeare plays. So he hired a team of researchers to examine the original works of Shakespeare, looking for secret hidden messages, saying that they'd been written by Sir Francis Bacon. Their research was largely inconclusive. However, it did mean that when World War I broke out, they repurposed their already existing team of codebreakers into a team to teach young men from the military how to do codes and ciphers. The people who headed up that project, Elizabeth Smith Friedman and her husband William Friedman, eventually went to Washington, D.C. after their time here, where they were instrumental in forming the NSA as it is today, as well as helping break the Japanese Code Purple during World War II. So they lived colorful lives long after their time here at Fabyan.
It's a really interesting tour. I thought this tour guides did a very, very nice job of providing some really insightful information about not only the facility, but also the collection that Colonel Fabyan and his wife had in the house. So, all in all, definitely recommend this place. Just wanted to show you what remains of Nelle's reflection pool. There it is right there. Just to give you a point of reference, it's not too far from the house, which is right over there. believe this was the monkey cage. Now keep your pet monkeys outside when it was warm up. So the tour guide was saying that the Japanese garden was inspired by the 1893 World's Fair. I guess there was an expo on Japanese gardens that took place at the fair, and a lot of the wealthy people decided that hey, that'd be a neat thing to add to our property. So that's where it came from. That's why there's so many Japanese gardens in and around the Chicagoland area, and there's one in Rockford as well. I thought that was an interesting connection to a very historical event. So back along the river now, and one of the stories that I heard while on the tour is that Colonel Fabyan wanted to build a bridge connecting both sides of the Fox River. So he was told by the Army Corps of Engineers that he couldn't do this because this was considered passable waterway. And he hemmed and hawed about it because it was only maybe about 4 feet of water. But Army Corps of Engineers says, nope, it's a passable waterway. So he called in a favor to President Roosevelt, and suddenly the Army Corps of Engineers reversed course and gave him his bridge. And upon completion of the bridge, the colonel also had this lighthouse built. It's kind of a middle finger to the Army Corps of Engineers. So just one more thing I wanted to show here before we conclude today's video. So back in the 1850s, there was an old Dutch mill that was made here in the United States. It was very rare for these to be made at the time, so this is what makes it somewhat special, I guess. It was, like I said, built in the 1850s, stood in what is now Lombard, which is about, I'd say, 15 miles from here. Well, the colonel paid $7 grand for this windmill, and then had about, roughly 70 grand to pay towards having it disassembled and then put back together out here in Geneva. So we're going to walk up there, and I'll give it a show. Now the windmill stands about 68 feet tall. Unfortunately, tours are no longer given inside the windmill, so we're just going to be able to walk up to it, get a quick peek from the outside. Nobody really knows why the colonel put this on his property. It was mostly just for show. Well, that concludes today's video from the Fabyan Villa Museum and Japanese Gardens. As I mentioned before, if you enjoy seeing content about profiles of museums, historical locations, roadside attractions, and nature preserves, consider giving my channel a like and a subscribe. I'll also include a link in the description of this place if you want to learn more information. Overall, this was a fun experience. I learned a lot about the history of a region that I'm from, and it's always neat to find out facts about what took place here and the history behind it. So, like I said, give this place a look next time you're in the area. I think you won't be disappointed. Well, until next time, can't wait to see you all later.